Welcome to Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Powered by the Monroe County Reporters. Here are your hosts, Jason Harwood and Jacob Litton.
All right, intro work this week. We are looking better than last week. Hi, I'm Jason Harwood. With me is Jacob Litton, and welcome everybody to another episode of Talking Grit. It's draft weekend. I got our rest in. We'll talk about mostly draft show. There's a listener question at the end, which kind of relates to the draft, so we're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about our experience at Ford Field on Thursday and explain why we didn't go live there. Kind of disappointing experience, to be honest with you. So, first of all, Jacob, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Ready to discuss the draft picks that we got.
I know lots to talk about. I think how we're gonna do this is we're gonna just like introduce our draft picks, and then at some point we'll talk about what we think of about the draft picks and stuff like that, and overall how it's gonna affect the roster and stuff like that. There's lots to discuss, and then we'll also get into the division. We're not gonna totally break down what the other teams have done in their division, but just kind of an overview, just so everyone's on the same page as far as what they did. So before we get to the draft stuff, it's happened on draft weekend, but the Lions unsurprisingly picked up JMO and Hutch's fifth-year option. So that was the least surprising thing that happened over the weekend, at least in my opinion.
Right, definitely. We fully anticipated that. It was nice, to get confirmation after the whole JMO trade talk and this and that. So,
yeah, picking up fifth-year option on Hutch is pretty much as a formality to, getting the longer-term deal done. So hopefully we hear about that sooner rather than later. Would have liked to have heard about it about the same time that we got Kirby's deal, just so that I don't have to stress about it at all. But it'll get done. I have full faith that they're going to get that done.
100%.
Yep. And JMO's still on the team after the weekend, right?
Yeah, as if there was any doubt.
Exactly. All right, Jacob. This is your first time going up to Ford Field for the draft experience. This was my second time. You want to tell everybody what happened and why it was not the best experience up there?
Yeah, so this was my first time ever going up there. Typically, here's the deal. We have a tradition. Me and my friend Jamie used to live with him. We always do a draft board. And then, we talk the whole time, have our own little draft points and everything to see who gets more right. And then me and JJ get Qdoba and watch the draft at home. Well, this time, Jason tells us how amazing Ford Field's draft party is. And we're like, you know what? We got to go down there and check it out. Maybe we can broadcast live from Ford Field. And, mildly disappointed with the way the draft party went this year. They did have some fun things set up to do around Ford Field. JJ wasn't really into, any of the stuff like I thought he might be. Jason didn't want any smoke in any of the contests, which is fine. He didn't, he said his arm was sore. It's whatever. No, I think me and you both had the same issue. We were both, you're there to watch the draft, and instead they decided to have a band playing throughout, almost the entirety of the first round. I think they were playing when we got there, which was 7:00 when they opened the doors. The band's playing, completely fine with that. I'm not hating on the band at all either. The band shouts out Collision 6 was the name. The band wasn't bad, but they're there when people are walking in. That's fine. A couple minutes before draft starts, the band goes away. We just assume they're probably done for the night. We can hear the draft for the first. I don't remember, Jason. Was it maybe four picks, 5 picks? Like
no, it was like up past 7 because I think like the Mason Graham pick I remember hearing. We kept waiting for. And we could hear him talking about, Shadur Sanders should be going pretty soon.
They were talking about Shadur right when we knew they were drafting Cam Ward. That's
a
different story. But we just assume that the band is done, and then all of a sudden, here they come back out on the stage. Like, well, maybe they'll only do a song or two. They played until about pick 24 or 25 or something like that. And, we just couldn't hear any of the, obviously, we're both fully invested into it. I want to hear the, analyzing of the picks. I want to hear the trade rumors. I want to hear everybody's opinion. I like hearing the players, interviews and everything afterward. So all that was kind of spoiled because the band was playing, the entire time.
Yep.
On top of the fact the Pistons game was not easily accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew they said beforehand that the Pistons game was going to be played up in the concourse, which I get, that you'd want to watch that. They have a huge screen. You would think they could and they did this in the last 2 minutes of the Pistons game. They played half of it up on the big screen with the draft on the other half. That would have been cool. Even with no sound, it would have been nice to be able to kind of keep track of, what was going on in the Pistons game. But they did not do this 2 years ago. They did not have a band play. You could hear the draft picks. I don't know who planned it, but you're there for a draft party, and then they have a band playing. Who's dancing? Who's at a draft party dancing? No one is. I mean, like you said, the band was fine. They played good. They were actually a pretty good band, but they misread the room about maybe they thought, hey, the Lions are picking last. These people are going to be bored. No, we came to a draft watch party to watch the draft with other Lions fans and, ooh and ah over other teams' picks and, just enjoy the whole draft thing. I don't know why they overthought and they had to have a band. I told my ticket rep, I emailed them and when I got up the next morning, 7:30 or whatever, next morning, I get up. First thing I do is email my ticket rep. I said, this is like inviting someone over to watch a movie with you and then playing a really loud CD in the background the whole time. Why? I don't get it, man. I could understand okay, the Lions made their pick. Let's have a celebration of this new player or whatever. Okay, a song or two after that or whatever they wanted to do. But it was very disappointing. One thing that they could interrupt the draft for, which they did, is they brought Jared Goff and Kirby Joseph up to talk, and I'm totally cool with that.
Right.
Other Lions things. I mean, we're there at the Lions draft watch party. That's cool that they can have that up, but just having this band play and kind of feel like you were going to make fun of being an old man. I'm like, why is this loud band playing? But no, you're on board with me, so I don't feel like the old man of the group.
Hey, when you're sitting at the table and we can't hear each other talking either, it's very disappointing for that.
I know. Yeah,
the vibes were off.
Yeah, I felt personally responsible. I invited you up there expecting we were going to have a good time. I was looking forward to just watching the draft with you. We hadn't done that before. It was cool to
talk about it and
just have this experience about oh, that was surprising. And, we talked ahead of time with Morgan last week. Where's the draft going to turn? Well, pick number 2, the Jaguars trade up. And, we kind of signaled them as someone that we don't really know what they're going to do. They trade up to get Travis Hunter. I immediately text my friend that's a Browns fan thinking he'd be excited about, acquiring more picks, especially get next year's first round pick. He was not happy. He wanted Travis Hunter. But I think getting Mason Graham is a very nice consolation prize, along with Jaguars next year first round pick.
Yeah, I think he'll feel differently with that first round pick next year.
I think so too. And also, it is cool that Travis Hunter will play both ways, but I just don't see him playing more than 60 or 70 snaps a game. You're going to have to pick and choose when you're going to use him. So it's not like you're like, oh, we got an offensive and defensive player. Well, you do, but you can't use him 120 snaps every game. He can't be your number one corner and your number one wide receiver.
Right. He's not going all pro corner and all pro receiver. He's not, nobody can play that much volume. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And if you do, you're not going to be, he wants to make it to a second contract, right? That's like the bell cow running back, and you're just giving it to him 300, 400 carries a season like they used to. They don't last very long. That's what will happen to, Travis Hunter if he, in my opinion, at least if he plays, that many snaps every week.
Right.
But yeah, it was fun hanging out with you. It was fun hanging out with your son. I hadn't hung out with JJ in a while, and I don't know what I don't know what he thought about me. I was trying to keep him, involved in everything. At one point, he said I had 0 Riz or something like that. So
yeah, right.
It's about right.
No, that's accurate. Right. That was a good assessment by him.
No,
he had a good time.
Okay.
Although he did say he made a reference about hanging out with middle-aged people.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. Pump the brakes. I'm not up there yet. He just coupled me. that's his thing. Now he calls me middle-aged.
Yeah.
And now because I'm friends with you, that makes me older, I guess. So
when the cheerleaders made the field, Jacob immediately goes, "Hey, JJ, you want to go up there and take a picture with me?" He was trying to bring his son along in there.
That's not at all. All right. You remember how you think.
Oh, man.
Jason's trying to deflect.
I mean, of course, I'm looking over the cheerleaders' direction, but I wasn't the one that was trying to get over there and get
I
pictures
didn't even
with
know
them.
they were over there.
Whatever. You know that you
I
asked
think
JJ.
this is exactly when you said you had 0 Riz.
That's true.
You did that. You got all giddy and red face.
Oh yeah, that's about right. That's my MO. Me and my very white pale skin. You could tell every emotion it's on. It does. I can't hide it at all. All right, man. Let's talk about this draft. So let's. I'm gonna let you break down each pick, and then we'll just talk about them. So why don't you start with round 1?
So you don't want to break down one at a time. You just want me to go through all of them first, and then we'll come back to it, or how do we?
We can. You do how you want to do. Let's
just we'll say the pick, then we'll talk about it, and then we'll go down.
All right, sounds good.
Rather than doing everybody at once, then we can talk a little bit about each one.
All right, I'm down with that. Go ahead.
All right, round 1, pick 28, Tyliek Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State. Were you surprised that we picked him? We were both there watching. We both saw the other names on the board.
Yep.
I was hoping Jihad Campbell, Mike Green was there too. I was like, okay, what are we doing here? I did not expect to see his name up there. What about you?
I did not. I was like a little shocked, and at that moment when they made the pick, I was a little disappointed. Not because of the player, just because we both had targeted. I think we were both excited that Campbell was still there at that pick. We've seen a lot of our other picks get picked in the middle of the draft. And so and then as it got closer, we're like, man, I hope there's still someone that we want. Campbell was a guy that we had identified as Araku wasn't still available at that point. And I think we were thinking it was going to be one of those two. You had Mike Green. I know you were high on him. So so when they come out with Tyliek Williams, I would say I was initially disappointed because it wasn't one of those other guys. After, even that night, as I thought about it more and more, I got less disappointed. I'm happy with the pick, but at that moment when it was picked, it was a little underwhelming.
Yeah, I definitely was surprised to see his name on the board, but then you start in the heat of it, we're expecting to see a couple names, right? I'm hoping one of those names flashes on that screen. It's Tyleek Williams, who was not somebody in any of our mocks or anybody that we had on there. He did have a top 30 visit. So, I mean, maybe we should have seen this coming, especially because we needed a defensive tackle, and all the other defensive tackles that we had mocked or had, our eyes on were all gone already. Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, all gone at that point. So based on how the draft is going, if you need a defensive tackle, you kind of have to take one right there. I think they said the Bills also had their eyes on Tyleek. So it's similar to the Gibbs thing where you pick him, people are calling it a reach. They're saying whatever, that we could have got him later. He was a 2nd round prospect, 40 overall, blah, blah. But, if this is the guy that we wanted, it's now or never. And I don't know if I'm sure you saw it, but the video of the Lions draft room, as soon as we were on the clock, they knew that's who we were getting. Yep. And we were waiting. They were waiting and hoping that, he fell. As soon as we were on the clock, they celebrated. That's exactly who they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was from what it sounds like is prior to us getting on the clock that someone offered to jump up to our spot and Brad Holmes shot him down. And my thinking, it was the Eagles because they ended up trading up one spot. It was probably the Eagles trying to jump up. We didn't want to go behind the Bills because, the Bills traded up in the 2nd round for a defensive tackle. So it really gives kind of some evidence that, Tyleek said in his interview that the Bills were interested. So that's where that rumor started. And then the day 2 of the draft, the Bills trade up, at the beginning of the 2nd round to get their defensive tackle. And so you're thinking, well, they might have had their eyes on Williams. So the Lions are probably right, and they probably read the room and be like, if we want this guy, he's not going to be there on day 2. We need to get him today. Now you can have your argument that you had the option to edge, why'd we have to pick defensive tackle? This is what the Lions decided to do. We don't know what their draft board was. Tyleek may be really high up on their draft board. My feeling is based on Holmes' comment that they were high on Grant. They said a lot of their guys went like middle of the draft. So if we were going to, if they had their eyes on a defensive tackle, I think Grant would have been on there. He went early to the Dolphins, right? So my feeling is that I don't think that they said we're going to take a defensive tackle. I just have a feeling that they want that position addressed, and player was really high up on the board, and they weren't going to risk losing him.
Right. I think the biggest surprise, if you look at because we put a lot of stock in the grit index, trying to see those rankings, and his grit index was actually kind of lower on the lower side of that. He wasn't one of the top few names. So maybe that's why he kind of wasn't as much on our radar as other people. But, that is something they go through, countless interviews and different comments from coaches and everything like that to try to figure out if he fits the mold. He got drafted and was on TikTok dancing with his cat. So maybe he's not, maybe he's not as cutthroat as some of the other guys. But, they put that graphic where they put him in, Honolulu blue and everything, put him in it. He looks just like Aleem.
Yeah.
He's got the hair coming out and everything, same kind of body form. So he's more of a run stuffer. Aleem, obviously is able to get after the quarterback. So maybe we got a good thing going here, and he's going to be asked to play a lot while Aleem recovers.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is that the more you thought about it, the more you're like, well, we do need someone to go, take Aleem's spot. Next year, Lopez and Reeder are potentially gone. I mean, their contracts are up. So unless we re-sign them, they're potentially gone. We're going to need someone to play next to Aleem. Tyleek is not, he may look like a nose tackle just in pure size, but he doesn't necessarily play like that. He plays more like Aleem, but he's great with the run. He could split double teams, which is awesome. He has great instincts. If you watch it, his ability to snuff out the run and move laterally is really impressive. And I think the Lions are always going to start with stopping the run. That's where if you don't know that by now, then you're not listening to what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are saying. Everything predicates on stopping the run. You get down first and second down, and then on third down, you can rush the passer. You got to earn the right to rush the passer is what they say. You got to stop them first and second down, fourth, third. And if you can't stop the run, teams are going to bully you. He needs a little help in his pass rush. I think that's along with Aleem. Aleem kind of comes and goes with his pass rush, at least in my opinion. There's some days where he looks unstoppable, and then there's some games where, you're not seeing it statistically. Defensive tackles, they're tough to see a lot of what they do in the box score. A lot of what they do is clog the middle for the linebackers to do their stuff. So the Lions know, whether they're being successful on their plays or not. They're charting all that stuff. I do like the player. Now you can have the argument of whether you could have got him later or not, or did we reach? I don't, frankly, and we'll get to this at the end when we go to the. I don't care what a player's ranked. If Brad Holmes likes the player, then I'm gonna have faith that that they're gonna do good on this roster. And that's what he's drafting is the player. He's not drafting a position. He's not drafting anything else. He's drafting the player and the person and trying to make this team better.
Exactly. And we both agreed on that in years past too. If you just put the list of players that we get, you're like, okay, it's a good haul. Mm-hmm. Don't take into consideration what round and what pick and what,
exactly.
Which we're going to talk about, giving up picks and moving up and everything like that. But generally speaking, these are the guys that you wanted. We're filling in positions of need and mission accomplished here.
Exactly. All right. Got some chat here. We'll look. All right, we'll talk about how you already got it. I see what you are. Coda's on the message board, so we'll answer his question.
Probably right, we're getting there soon.
Yep. Go ahead. All right. Round two. Who? Anything else on Tyleek first? I'm sorry.
No, we can move on.
All right. Round two, we picked Tate Ratledge, the guard out of Georgia, with pick 57. We were at pick 60, moved up. He's got a RAS score of His raw athletic score is 9.96 out of 10. That's impressive. The grit index, 80.85. This was one of those players, if you followed, Eric Schlitt, he's mocking him all the time to the Lions. A lot of the mocks went Tate Ratledge. We did too. So this was like the least surprising pick out of all of them, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was cool that somebody that we mocked actually came to the team.
Yes.
I was happy to see that somebody we wanted, we actually got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. His mullet is going to fit in well. The whole video of him getting picked is great. Him and his family just sitting there. He seems like someone that's just going to fit in with the team really well. They
Right.
describe him as a goofball, which is pretty good for that offensive line room. You already got Graham in there, goofball. Decker's fun to be around. Frank's good guy. I think he's going to fit in well with that group.
Absolutely. Because, every prospect profile you read, you do see the thing like he's a goofball, he's a good person in the locker room, but, mean, tough, dirt bag, like all those things come up when he's on that field. I'm talking about, against the defense. He's a tough player.
Yep.
His coach at Georgia, Kirby Smart, said he's as special as they come. Says his 95% of Georgia's players voted him as a team captain. So there's 130 players on the Georgia team. 95% voted him as a team captain.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much confidence that they have in this guy.
Yeah, these are the type of players that the Lions draft. And that's where the grit index comes in. I know that leadership is like one part of it. Grit is not just like how you play, but there's like 5, as Eric said, there's like 5 things that they go through: leadership, all those type of things. And so that's where the grit index really shows. But, that's how they're all the Lions will draft. If you look at it, they're all team captains. They always seem to draft the team captains. Those are the players. Those are the type of players when they command respect in the room. They'll listen to leadership. They're very coachable. I'll take the guy that plays at like 90% talent of the best players, but will work his butt off for you. I will take that guy all the time. Occasionally, you're going to get a guy with amazing talent and amazing work ethic, like an Amon-Ra or something like that, that just everything just meshes well. But a lot of times you could have, for a wide receiver, you could have a diva there, like let's say Jamar Chase or something like that, is an amazing player, but I don't think that he provides the leadership and all this stuff off the field that like an Amon-Ra possesses. And I think that just helps your team overall.
Definitely, 100%. You want everyone, everyone with the same idea, the same mindset. We're all working towards the same thing. We don't need anybody causing distractions or anybody being it's about the team. It's not about yourself.
Yep.
This is one of your favorite picks, though, right? Ratledge?
It is. I
figured as much.
I saw it, we traded up 3 spots, and we can argue about, whether we gave up too much just to move 3 spots. We got the guy, right? And that's what I'm happy about. We got the guy that's going to be good on this team. I mean, he could start. I mean, he could be our week 1 starter.
And, he's going to compete for that starting spot instantly, right away.
We're going to talk. I mean, at the end of this, we'll talk about how this is going to affect the roster. I mean, there's going to be a lot of competition at the guard spot in training camp. And I really can't wait to see how this all shakes out. We got younger. We'll talk about another guy we drafted here. We got younger in that position and maybe cheaper too. So, just if these guys work out, we might be moving on for some other people. I just want to talk about I looked in the Beast to look at the strengths and weaknesses of these guys. So I just want to pull out a couple things that they said about Tate. Great leader, which we just talked about. He can pull, which is, good. Lions like athletic people that can pull. He's very strong in pass pro. That's awesome. And he has experience in gap and zone schemes, which the Lions run both. So it's nice that he's already well prepared for that. Things that he may need development on is that he may be just stuck on the right side. I know the Lions like playing multiple, but he's pretty much exclusively played on the right side. So who knows if he can move to the left. I'm sure they're going to cross train him. Hank Fraley will do that, and if he doesn't get a starter spot, he's going to have to be able to play both the left and the right side. And he's missed some games due to injury. So that's another thing to worry about with offensive linemen. But we'll see. I'm not too worried about it. I'm this guy's going to want to be on the field and be ready to play.
This dude's massive too. Anyone that watches or listens to this show knows how much Jason loves big, strong men.
That's right.
And this guy's 6'7", 308 pounds.
Yeah.
So he's much bigger than Mahogany or Coyote. So
yeah. Yep. We'll
see what that looks like in training camp.
I see a spot where he's on the field week 1 or earlier in the season. The Lions will play the best players, so we'll see how it goes. But
he's gonna have a fair shot at that starting position.
Exactly. So. Anything else you want to talk about with Ratledge?
No, we can move on. That was a good pick, and one that he had a second round grade most, in most boards. I think he was like the 3rd or 4th ranked guard on most of them. So that's one where I don't think you can really even put up the argument that we reached or, it was a steal or anything. I think that's right on par.
Yep. He's
just very unsurprising, like exactly how we would have wanted the draft to go, right there.
Yeah, the only argument you made is would he have been there at pick 60, but I really don't care about that, to be honest with you. I want to get our guy. We got our guy. So at the end of the day, I'm happy. Pick 3, or round 3, pick 70, Isaac Tesla, wide receiver out of Arkansas. This is the one that people were shaking their heads at, mostly because of what we gave to get Isaac.
I get it, right? This is a cool story, right? He's, the hometown kid. He wore the Lions jersey to his visit. He spent a couple years in Division II Hillsdale, which is in Michigan. He goes to Arkansas. I mean, when you read everything about him, you look at what, he's 6'4". He's a huge target on 3rd down and red zone, makes plays in traffic, 0 drops at Arkansas, did not drop the ball. He played quarterback in high school. He's tough. He played with a broken hand, I think, for an entire year.
Yeah.
He's a special teams monster. This is just a huge get for us. And somebody that we saw, we saw the top 30 visit. This is somebody I talked about. We talked about him weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So nothing about that is surprising. And it's awesome that we were able to get him. The big issue, like you said, is just the fact that this was a 5th or 6th round prospect by most boards. Anywhere from, I think, 17 to 30 as far as what, his ranking was for his position. And then here we go. We give up a decent amount to trade up and draft him 70 overall. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where the dice roll comes into play. It's less about, the player that we got and more about what we gave up and what that could potentially become. So, I know you like the guy too. We both have the same feeling about that, but what's your thought about moving up?
Yeah. So the trade, I think, so Jeremy Reisman put a thing out that, basically on trade value, it was even. Like, we gave up the appropriate amount to move up there. I know when people say, hey, you gave up 3 third-round picks essentially to move up there. Let's look at those third-round picks, right? The one was the last pick in the 3rd round. So it's essentially a 4th-round pick, right? It's the very last one. Next year's is the compensatory pick that we got for Aaron Glenn. That's going to be probably the last pick or one of the last couple picks in the 3rd round. So, it's not like they're high 3rd-round picks. And then hopefully if we do what we want to do, we're going to be picking at the end of the 3rd round with our normal picks. So they're not like top, 3rd-round picks. It's not like at the beginning of the 3rd round. So I get it. The thing is that, like, would he have been available way back? Or, like, why did we have to trade up that far to get him? I'm going to defer to Brad on that. He has a good read on when people are going to be picked. And I think our listener question later on is going to really address that. So I think I'm going to save my true answer for then. I'm happy with the player, and that's where I'm going to go with. I'm like, okay, we gave up those picks. That's done. All right. Am I happy with the player? Yeah, I'm happy with the player. So let's just go and see what he can do for us. He provides something
a little bit. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Isaac Tesla provides something that the Lions do not have on the roster. A big slot receiver. Guy's tall, and there's no one else like him on the roster. I know you got Tim Patrick, but he plays more the traditional X, whereas Tesla, as of right now, maybe he could develop to the X receiver in a year, but this year, along with special teams, he could provide a tall X receiver, just another tall receiver for Jared Goff. And like you said, no drops. Jared Goff is really accurate. We don't have to worry about it with Tesla. If he gets in his vicinity, he's going to catch the ball.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something, I don't know if you want to talk about what Coda just said, but I don't know if you can bring up his comment on there. Just
let's do that. Yeah, I can. All right, we'll bring it up here. Coda says, not sure if you guys are talking about it, but in my opinion, I don't think we keep Tim Patrick. The fact we traded so aggressively to get Tesla should be a sign.
Yeah, in my opinion, with that, the idea is that we get Tesla in here, let him work with Goff, throughout training camp. Like we just said, he's got value on special teams and everything like that. Let him get acclimated, and then as the season goes on, maybe we do start seeing him more. Maybe we see less of Tim Patrick. This is just another spot where it's like, it's up for grabs. It's not like just because he's a rookie, he's going to be kicked to the side. He's not going to get his chance. And it's also, the opposite of that. Just because we gave up draft capital doesn't mean that he's going to be getting more opportunity than somebody else. This is just going to be another battle. He's going to get some, he's going to get some work. He's going to get some chances, probably in the Hall of Fame game, right?
Yeah, we're going to see him.
Got.
But the thing is, I don't think that I don't know if Coda is meaning this now or meaning it for the following season, that whether we're going to keep, re-sign Tim Patrick next year. I don't think, unless something happens in training camp that I don't expect, where Tesla just shows out and just overshows Tim Patrick, that they're going to keep him instead of, they're going to keep Tesla instead of Tim Patrick. I don't think that's an option. If you look at the scouting report on Tesla, it's that he has trouble fighting through contact. When you're an X, you're going to get bump and run on the outside. You're going to have to be able to fight through that. I'm not saying that Tesla will never be able to do that, but I'm going to say it's going to take more in training camp for him to get there. And also, if you look on the Beast, one of the weaknesses is that he doesn't run a full route tree. They're not going to have him in there if he can't run everything they need for the offense for out of that wide receiver X position. Now, he could develop that later on this season, and we could see him more towards the back half of the season in that traditional X role, or maybe they save that for the next year. My opinion, Tim Patrick's, unless something wild happens or Tim Patrick gets hurt, his place on the team is fully fixed, at least for this year. But I think the Lions would like to get younger at that position and be able to develop Tesla. And why not let him get a year under his belt with Goff, build that rapport, and then also learn all these, learn all from these weaknesses. You have Amon-Ra, who's going to be the best teacher for running a route, right? Running routes. He's going to be able to teach him how to do that correctly. And so I'm okay with the pick. I'm okay with the player. Watching the highlight films, you could see he could catch, and he is super athletic.
Yes, I just want to mention earlier, I dove a little bit deeper just to try to see, and he did meet with several teams. He had top 30 visits with the Bills, the Rams, the Saints. He definitely was out there. Teams were doing their due diligence, and that's impossible to read on a receiver because anybody can use a receiver.
Yes.
It's almost one of those things where all 32 teams could draft a receiver at any given point. So it's not like, the defensive tackle thing, where maybe you've got a pretty good read on what teams are going to be looking for one, who's not, when you need to trade up, when you don't. That's really, really hard to read. So if you fall in love with somebody and this is somebody you want on your team, you kind of have to go after it and get them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw, but he's known for his celebrations too. He loves a good celebration. Mm-hmm. He actually hit the same headstand that Amon-Ra did.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that was cool.
Looked pretty good too. So we kind of hit on it, but let's just, his RAS score is 9.93, again out of 10. Ultimate athlete, and his grid index is 77.36, which was the second overall for all the wide receivers in the draft. You could see why he was high up on the Lions list. He has that grit factor. One thing I want to ask you, so he played in the SEC 2 years. His athletic score, everything about him was off the charts, except for his production was low. So does that concern you at all, Jacob?
No. 0%. I don't know. I didn't watch a whole lot of Arkansas football, so I don't know exactly what kind of offense they were running. But it's one of those things. These athletic freaks that show out at the combine and show this stuff, they earn roles on teams. They get a good look just because of what they can bring. I mean, he's not being, like I said, he's not being given anything. It's not like we used a high draft pick and that we're counting on him to do anything right now. So it doesn't concern me at all that the production isn't necessarily there, especially with the 0 drops.
Yep. And also, he could punt return. So we talked about it before the draft. Khalif, this is last year Khalif's deal. We're going to need someone that can punt return if we don't bring him back next year. And that's another thing that this kid can provide. So it's, he's providing things that we don't have. This huge athletic size, really, really raw athlete, and he could develop into something. I can understand someone's argument about, did we jump up and get him too high? And I really have nothing to say against that other than I'm going to trust Brad Holmes on this one and say this is his guy and maybe he had a read on it. But again, we'll talk about this at the end when we get to the listener question because I think that answer will encompass all that.
Yeah.
You want to go through the next pick, Jacob?
All right. So that was round 3, pick 70. Our next pick did not come until round 5, pick 171. And then we, traded up to draft Miles Frazier, offensive guard out of LSU. And I really, really like this pick. Miles Frazier was ranked the 5th ranked guard. He was a 3rd round prospect. He was actually on that athletic report. He was the number 81 overall player. And we drafted him at 171st overall. I think this is probably somebody else that Brad Holmes, they had him circled. They see the chance to move up and get him. We give up 2-6 to move up into the 5th and draft him. This is somebody else not to sleep on as far as he can come in here and compete. And you talked about earlier with Tate, where he played right guard the majority of the time, but Miles Frazier moved around. He played guard, he played tackle. He's been around different parts of the line, and this is somebody maybe they drafted like, hey, maybe we can get him to play center. Maybe he can be the backup center, and we can have somebody that moves all around. I really, really like this pick.
Yeah, the more I looked up, I was gone on Saturday. So I had to look at your text messages. I had no internet access on Saturday. So
were you getting my text as I sent them or no?
I had a chainsaw in my hand and I was not looking at my phone. I went back to the car every once in a while and I would see it. But I just didn't even have my phone.
I was trying to fill you in, but then part of me was like, man, he's probably going to get all 7 of these messages at once. So,
that's fine. You just keep doing that because it was cool because then I could easily flip through what we got. I appreciate it. When I saw this one, I was like, I don't know as much about Miles Frazier. I'm 5th round pick. I don't know too much about him, but the more I looked at him, I was like, this is exactly the type of player that we need. We need a guy who could play up and down the line. If you're going to carry some on your roster, the 8th, 9th lineman, you want to have someone that, could play. If Taylor Decker gets hurt during the game, you could put him in there or, it gives you so many options. Maybe he's better at guard and we could push someone out to tackle it depends on how our roster is constructed, but I like the idea of someone that can play multiple positions. It just increases the chances that you're going to make a game day roster, in my opinion, especially on the line. If you could play multiple, then you're gonna get a chance to play on the line.
Definitely. And like you said, I like the competition. I like what this brings to the team for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely guard is going to be a really, a really tight competition this training camp. It's going to be interesting to see. Miles Frazier's RAS score was 9.3. Super athletic guy. He's grid to index of 55.99, so he shows up on Eric's grid index, which that should surprise no one. As much work as him and Anthony put into that, it was surprising that round 1 the grid index is lower, but grid indexes you should not pick just based on the grid index because that shows nothing really athletically or how good you are at a position, but it shows you if you're going to be a good fit for the Lions. And so then, you can kind of weigh on who we're going to draft. So I can understand why our 1st round pick maybe is lower on the grid index just because you're picking more talented guys up there. He did show up on there, and also there's just limited information. But anyways,
Right.
Miles Frazier, like you said, he's we said he's super athletic. He's described as a bully. Same thing as Tate, right? Guy that's just gonna maul you on the line. This guy can pull. Obviously, a higher RAS score would indicate that he is athletic and be able to pull. And like you said, multiple things that he needs to work on per the beast is penalties. He needs to learn how to properly bend in at the guard position, which Hank Fraley, I'm sure, will be working with him. And then they also said he struggled with twists on the line. Again, I have faith that Hank Fraley will get that taken care of.
Hank Fraley's just got to be so stoked to get these two guys on the line right now.
Yeah, I know.
Be able to mold them like they're just perfect.
Yeah, and they talked about I think it was Brad Holmes' press conference talked about Hank, and he's basically a super coach, and it's nice to have that at your disposal. I know that he was out interviewing for offensive line or offensive coordinator positions, I think with Seattle. I'm just glad that he's back. He just makes our team so much better.
Definitely.
All right, so that was that pick, round 5. Or anything else on Miles, or we want to move on?
No, we can move on.
All right, this pick, fell in love with this guy instantly, right?
I knew that, and I texted you that.
Yeah,
I saw the name, and I was like, actually, this is somebody that wasn't on my radar. Took 2 clips before I was like, oh my god, this guy's a fan favorite, and I knew. I said, Jason's gonna love him.
Yeah, watch the line. Go ahead and introduce him, and then we'll talk.
All right, round 6, pick 196. Ahmed Hassanein, edge from Boise State. He's just a dog, man.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he's the first Egyptian person from Egypt that was drafted in the NFL draft. He is a top-ranked CrossFit athlete. When he was in Egypt, he is an athlete, which is raw athletic score is 7.08, which I thought it would be higher based on the CrossFit stuff. But man, you watch the highlights of this guy. He's huge. He looks gigantic with his pads on.
Right.
He plays with a crazy motor. Putting him on the outside of Hutch, wow, just going to have 2 guys with incredible motor.
Right. 2 guys that will not stop. They are not going to stop coming after you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, after, I don't know if you feel the same way, but after seeing this and looking at the clips, he's ranked 5th on the grit index. It was like he didn't have a top 30 visit with the Lions, but it was like, how did I not see this guy? How have I not been in on this guy before? He also says he's the only defensive lineman in FBS to have 15 tackles for a loss in each of the last 2 seasons. I think that also speaks to that motor is just relentless pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
He's not giving up on any plays. And this was all, before it showed, because I love watching the draft calls. I really like seeing, when they call the prospects, when they pick up the phone, once they first find out they're being drafted. I really enjoy watching that, like for everybody, really, not especially for Lions, but I like watching that for everybody. And to see him pick up the phone, he's, talks to Dan Campbell. He's like, I will die on the field for you, coach. I just need you to believe in me. Fully invested in it. And then right away, it's like, dude, love this guy.
Yeah, I know Jeremy and Eric tweeted out that they fell in love with him like 30 seconds into the Zoom call that they had when they got introduced. And then they showed that Zoom call on Detroit Lions. You can watch it. I don't know if you've seen it now, but it's not on YouTube. But if you go on Detroit Lions, that initial Zoom call where he's talking to the beat writers, it's up there on DetroitLions.com. Anybody who's listening to this, I highly recommend you go watch it because it'll tell you everything you need to know about this guy. He's going to be one guy that we're going to be, we're looking at this 6th round pick, right? I have no designs that he's going to be the starting edge. I know that's not going to happen this year, but he's a guy that I want to root for and to get him on the field and just, he'll do anything the coach asks him. That's what he said. I'm going to die on the field. He said, I'll do special teams. I'll do anything. I'm sure he would have go get everybody coffee if that's what the coach told him to do. He'll do whatever he can to help the team. He's a great teammate. He's super tough. So he played 9 games with a torn labrum, and in those 9 games with a torn labrum, got 10 sacks. Okay, the guy's I mean, you're gonna just play through pain. You don't if he's out, then you know that he's he's really hurt. Um, like you said, he has a high motor. However, he has a tendency to overplay and miss tackles. That's something that they can be coached out. He is super raw. So he moved to this country 5 years ago. He didn't even know what football was. He tells a story in that thing about Aaron Donald. So he watched Aaron Donald play, and his brother was apparently in this country, played like semi-pro football. So he's like, what high school does that guy play for? And he's like, that's the NFL. His brother told Ahmad, that's the NFL. He's like, well, what's the NFL? He said it's a professional football league. So he didn't even know about the NFL when he came over to this country. And so he is so raw in football. And for him to make this huge jump just in 5 years reminds me a little bit of Ziggy Ansah. Remember, he didn't
Yes,
play
yeah,
football, and then all of a sudden he's just one of those players. Now, I know Ziggy got injured. But he did as a different coaching staff. Things are totally different. So, but
also
it's
less pressure when you're a 6th-round pick and not the 1st-round pick.
exactly, yeah. No one comes and expects you to be starting edge, but if he gets on the field, I know that he's gonna play his heart out, and he's huge. Man, if he could just collapse the one side and just get him towards Aiden, it'll be awesome. So I'm happy with that pick. Really happy with that pick with that
For
player.
sure.
All right. Anything else on Ahmad or?
Nope, we can move on.
All right. Round 7, pick 230. Dan Jackson, safety out of Georgia. Georgia was the place that we kept going back to, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Brad Holmes talked about watching Georgia's pro day and watching the practice and stuff like that.
Yes.
He likes the way the Georgia program is run.
I think it's like one of those guys. They're ready. They play like they run like a professional practice. So
Yes,
he said it'll be pretty easy transition for these guys to move over to the Lions because they're going to be already prepared for what the Lions expect out of a player. So his RAS score was 7. His grid index was 76.33, the 7th overall for a safety, which is a good sign. He's a great tackler, has great anticipation, very durable. Kirby Smart, coach of Georgia, says all he does is get everything he's got every single day. Sounds like a lot of these players at the Lions draft, and
right.
that's why he would have a higher, grit score, and he could play special teams. Which for a 7th round pick, if you didn't, I think it's a non-starter for the Lions if you don't play special teams. You're not going to be picked in the 7th round if you can't play special teams.
Definitely. Oh yeah, that's well established. No, but safety was another position of need. We went out and got one. This guy, former walk-on, wasn't invited to the combine either. So, he had to show what he had at pro day. From what I've seen, he's a huge hitter and he's good on special teams. So, a roster spot's not guaranteed for these guys. So,
Yep.
but the opportunity is there, and it's going to be a fair opportunity for you to see what you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have some spots for safety on this roster. I mean, he could make the roster, no doubt. But he's gonna
no
probably
doubt. But it's it's a battle.
Oh yeah. Yeah, nothing's gonna be given to these guys down here that are picked in the late rounds. And when the Lions kept acquiring like later round picks, I was like, man, I hope they bundle some of these and trade up. And we did that in the case of Miles because I was like, we don't have a lot of roster spots to give these guys.
Right. But I mean, you look at the safety position right now. Obviously, you got Branch and Kirby. Then you've got Strickland, who was a undrafted free agent last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Norris, who was an undrafted free agent. I'm actually not sure exactly what other safeties we have on the squad right now. So that's it's there. But...
Oh yeah. Yep, definitely. So let's move on to our other 7th-round pick 244, Dominic Lovett, wide receiver, again out of Georgia. RAS score is 6.66. His grid index score is 53.88, which is 23rd overall for a wide receiver. What'd you think of Dominic?
I'm going to be honest with you. So I really like our draft class. I like all these players. This is the only one on here, which I can't say that he was on my radar ahead of time or that, he was anybody I really even necessarily heard of. But, you look at his strengths, you look at his weaknesses, and I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how this shakes out because we did use a draft pick on a wide receiver, but he's 5'10". He is fast, but he does not return kicks. They said he's a pretty good gunner on special teams, but do we use, is that what we were eyeing in the 7th round? Is that we really needed a gunner and that's what we were doing? Do you hope that we just take that speed and we can train him to return kicks? Because you would think a school like Georgia, we just talked about, very respected and everything. If they've got somebody with NFL level speed, you'd think they would be trying to have him return kicks. So the fact that he didn't return kicks at all is kind of, really big question mark for me. He also had some fumbling issues. He struggled with drops. I think his weaknesses definitely outranked the strengths from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So on paper, this one's kind of a puzzling pick for me. How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a 7th round pick, though. Not much invested here.
Yes, it's a 7th round pick, but it's not a throwaway.
No.
So what did we see? If you're Brad Holmes, what did you see? Like, we want to get this guy now. We don't want to run the risk of having to fight other teams for him undrafted, to pay him different bonuses and get the undrafted competition or whatever.
I could also see you got a Georgia wide receiver. He, maybe it was just from the big time program that was the tiebreaker from the guys that were out there. And we didn't want to risk trying to get him in the undrafted rank. Brad Holmes knows why he picked him. Looking at everything I've seen, I'm with you. I'm a little bit puzzled. He's a smaller guy, but I don't.
He could come out and just absolutely destroy it in training camp, and I hope he does. Like I said, this is no ill will against him at all. Obviously, I want him to do great. I just on paper and everything that I'm looking at didn't make sense to me.
Yep, I'm with you there.
So there's no hate. I just did. This one is the only one I would say doesn't add up completely.
Yep, I'm with you. So, but we'll see. We got we'll see him a little bit in NFL rookie minicamp coming up here. We'll hear about him, but it won't be till the summer that you can see how when he's running with the other guys and seeing how it goes. So, anything else you want to add on him?
No, I'm good.
All right. Why don't you round up a little bit what the rest of our division did? I think they may be just the top 2 or 3 picks for each one of these guys, or anything that you found interesting.
Yeah. So this is what the the enemy got done during the draft. So the Green Bay Packers, obviously the draft was in Green Bay. I don't know if you saw the Green Bay fans trying to make it out like it was bigger or better than Detroit. It was not. The numbers were not as good.
No.
I saw something online where they were like, well, it was whatever it was. It was more people attending the draft than the population of Green Bay. So why does that matter for anything?
Exactly.
More people were at the draft for Detroit. I mean, that just goes to show that most of those people were traveling and not from your area.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on. Green Bay finally drafts a receiver in round 1, Matthew Golden, somebody that you really liked, Matthew Golden.
Mm-hmm.
2nd round, Anthony Belton, offensive lineman. This is actually somebody that I had my eye on. I know he visited with the Lions, somebody that maybe we were going to target later. And then 3rd round, they draft another receiver, Tate Williams out of TCU. Outside of that, I don't think there's anybody else on that they drafted that was, top 30 or anybody that we were looking at. But interesting that the Packers finally start drafting some receivers, and we'll see what they got, right?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see as they get on the field. Aaron Rodgers is probably like saying it's about time, but
right.
It'll help their middling, their average quarterback they have over there with Jordan Love.
Yeah, I'm not, based on who they drafted, it's not like, oh man, I'm not concerned about that at all for Green Bay.
Yep.
Shouts out to Matthew Golden. I mean, hopefully, can't root for him to do that good, but I root for players. So now let's talk about the Bears, though.
Yeah.
This one was tough for me. So the Bears, with their first pick, go tight end Colson Loveland out of Michigan. That stings. Obviously, we're Michigan fans. I didn't want him to have to go to a division rival, especially because I know how Ben Johnson used Sam Laporta, and I know what he's cooking up over there with the offense. So didn't like that they drafted Colson Loveland round 1. Then round 2, they draft one of the highest wide receiver prospects, Luther Burden out of Missouri, and that was a nightmare. I think that Chicago definitely, without a doubt, is already gotten way better on offense, and that's not even with Ben Johnson installing whatever he's going to install over there. Then they get another second round, 2 more second round picks. They go offensive tackle. They get more offensive line help. Is it Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College? And then they get defensive tackle Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M. Really, really good draft for the Bears. Yep. It pains me to say. Really good offseason, really good draft. I hate them. And a later round pick, I don't know how you say that name, Ruben Hippolyte. That was actually somebody that met with the Lions. He's a linebacker, so somebody that maybe could have been a late round pick for us, and they kind of sniped him away.
Yep.
So the Bears are getting up there, man. They, obviously we hate the Packers the most, but the Bears they're making their way.
Cool. Loveland going 10 was shocked because Warren wasn't off the board yet, and he was the consensus number 1 tight end going. And every mock they had Warren going up. I know there was talks of Loveland shooting up boards before the draft, but when his name dropped, I was like, "Cool, Michigan." Bad. It went to Chicago. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, right. But you feel really happy for Colson, but then you're like, "Oh,
yeah,
no."
Top 10 pick, man. That surprised me. I like Colson Loveland, but man, I don't know if I ever saw a top 10 pick when him playing with Michigan. I know last year was hard because Michigan's quarterback situation was hot garbage, but I don't know. Did you see top 10 talent out of Loveland? Did you think when you were watching?
I mean, you know how tight ends are used in the NFL. No, he obviously was a really good player for us, but you're right. Top 10, I don't know. He was also hurt this year, so maybe without the injuries and stuff, maybe they would have had to feed him more targets. He definitely, can make the difficult catches and can find seams to get open. So,
yep,
it's hard to, be completely impartial because he's a Michigan player. Obviously, I want him to do well and I want him to be drafted high. But if I'm being honest, no, I don't think top 10, especially, what we see in the small sample size without JJ McCarthy out there.
Yep.
But now he's not going to have to worry about that. He's got a huge Ben Johnson offense, huge quarterback. I expect him to do well this year, except for 2 games.
All right, and they'll Bears it up. They'll screw it up.
They'll find a way.
Yep. All right. What the Vikings do?
Vikings, they were the one that only had a few draft picks. I think they traded, so they were able to get an extra one out of here. But I mean, really, their first round pick, they got Donovan Jackson, guard out of Ohio State. That's somebody that was potentially on our radar. Mm-hmm. And then we'll just, third round pick, they got a receiver out of Maryland, Ty Felton. Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State. That was also somebody, I think he had a local visit with the Lions. So, could have potentially been a target there. But there's nobody up and down that's really, terrifying or anything for the Vikings. I mean, they also didn't have very much draft capital to work with in the beginning. So,
yep,
they did what they could. Hopefully they suck.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So that's what they did. So out of all the picks that we made, what was your favorite pick?
That's tough to pick just one favorite pick. Obviously, Tesla's got the Michigan roots. Then you've got Hassanin with all, the stuff. I really liked the Miles Frazier pick.
Okay.
I just thought, if we're going to be talking about value and we're dogging Brad Holmes for reaching and stuff like that, this is somebody that was pretty highly ranked that was falling that we swooped in and got, and somebody that I'm hoping, can contribute who knows where on the line, maybe in multiple places along the line. But I think that was my favorite pick. What about you?
Ah, man. Well, who would I pick?
It's hard to pick one because I'm really satisfied with the draft class.
It is. I for a guy that I want to root for, let's go with Hassanin. I mean, I just really, and those guys just provide so much for you to root for. Tesla with the Michigan stuff. I mean, finding out he went to the draft visit with his Michigan jersey or his Lions jersey, and Holmes thought it was some cheesy move, and Tesla's like, No, this is my own jersey. I had from like 10 years ago. This is the real
Did you
thing.
see what player it was? I did not see what player.
No, it's a name with his jersey on it.
Oh, it was a personalized jersey.
It's like
okay.
his personalized jersey, and I think it was number 10. So I don't
Nice.
even know if there's a number 10 on the roster, but that would be crazy for him just personally if he got his, his own personal jersey that he had, and then it comes to fruition. So that was another one when you mentioned Tesla. I'm talking about when you mentioned like watching the home videos of people getting the call.
Yeah. Yep.
And his family realizing it's the Lions on the line, and they're like slapping. I saw two people on the couch slapping, and then they go crazy. It gives me, I probably say this a lot. It gives me goosebumps, but those things I am like an emotional person when it comes to that. When it comes to seeing those guys get their dreams met, like I just know that, never had anything like this happen in our life, but I've had things where really good things. You get that phone call and you're, life changes or whatever. It's amazing. I'm thinking about when I talk to my wife and she tells me I'm on my way home. She tells me there's something that I got to see when I get home, and it was a pregnancy test, and those type of things. Like that's the only thing that I can equate that's been that big in my life that what these guys are going through. But it's really nice emotionally when you see all the hard work that these guys went through, and they get to experience like the ultimate joy of being picked. It's pretty awesome.
Agreed. Yeah, the Tesla thing was cool because you could tell his family was trying to find out who it is.
Yes.
And, obviously they don't want to bother him when he's on the phone, and then he says something about Mrs. Ford, or I think he says Ford, and that's when the whole place just erupts while he's still on the phone. They can't believe it.
Yes.
Did you see Tate Ratledge's video too?
Yes, his was like
he's at home.
Yeah,
and he's trying to fight back tears and everything like that. That's the emotional ones. Like, oh man,
I know.
Especially because he's there with his mullet and everything like that. It just looks like somebody you don't want to cross. And then he's got the lip quiver and everything. He's trying to fight it back.
I like that because he was sitting next to, I don't know if it was his dad or grandfather. I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Same thing. But it just tells me what type of person he is just from the view of who he chooses to have at his party, right? And who he's sitting next to, who's important to him in his life, because you're going to put that person that's super important to you next to you. And that just tells me a lot about him as a person. I'm making assumptions here, but that's just
right.
I just think that I can gather a lot about what he values in life based on who he chose to be at his party. Didn't look like it was a huge party, but it looked like, the important people were there. And I really like that. There's so many of these picks that I can, I'm going to root for all these guys now. I mean, they're Lions now, right? We got to root for these guys, but it gave you, that's the one thing that's awesome about the people the Lions pick. They're so easy to root for because they work hard. They fit Detroit, right? Like you and I know we're not playing football, but we work hard every day. And there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that work hard every day. And it's so easy to relate to these guys because they don't take anything for granted. They do their job. And Hassanin said that. He goes, I just do my job. Like what coach tells me to do, that's what I do. And I don't, he goes, he said, I'm not a robot out there, but I do my job. And it's easy to relate to those type of athletes. And it's one thing that I really like about just Detroit sports is that the people that we can root for have those type of, thoughts and those type of experiences, and you could just really get behind them.
Well said. I agree. 100.
Yep. All right. We don't need, we could probably save this a little bit for future podcasts, but how do you think this draft's going to affect the current roster? And I really think that the question out there is how it relates to me is I'm thinking of Graham Glasgow.
Right.
That's what I put on there. So I don't know, like if you had a different thought on that, but some people only say, are we going to cut Graham? And so I looked into the numbers a little bit. So we wouldn't cut him before June 1st because we would basically only save like $1.5 million on the cap because he'd have like 5.8 million in dead money. However, if we cut him after June 1st, we'd save $4.5 million on the cap this year. We have 2.9 in dead money, and then I think like 2.9 next year on dead money. If we save it if he's on this roster the whole year, then he only has like 2.8 875 in dead money next year. So if these draft picks worked out, I think this might be Graham's last year, and they could potentially cut him, earlier. I don't think that's going to happen just because he's the backup center. But
you'd have to be really sure about at least two of these. Well, no, you'd have to be sure about all three, I think, before you'd be able to let Graham go.
yes,
His versatility and everything, his experience, I don't see them letting him go. He would have to be really, really outplayed, and you'd have to have a perfect, like let's say Mahogany comes in, does the same thing he did last year. Ratledge comes through on the right side, and then all of a sudden you've got those two, and they're working perfectly. The line's meshing well. Frazier is, picking up center. Maybe he's picking up a couple of the tackle spots or whatever he's doing. All of those things would have to click perfectly, and even so, I just don't think I don't think that would be worth it to get rid of Graham.
No.
Now, you're right, maybe next year, but I don't think if they were to let him go, this would be one of those things, probably like final cuts. And that'd be pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen this year. So anyone that's looking at it, hey, we drafted 2 guards. I think Graham's versatility and the fact that he's the backup center will make him he is the best replacement for the center if Frank were to go down.
Yes.
And so I don't. Graham may not start. I mean, that conversation could happen. You could have Mahogany and Ratledge in there, and Graham may be your primary backup. And if that's the case, I'm super happy with that because he could play all 3 of those inside positions, and that gives you a really good backup. And in case, Mahogany or Ratledge were to get hurt, then you could put Graham in there and still be, still do a good job.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
Something else, which is indirectly, the question, how will the draft affect the current roster here? So the fact that the only edge we drafted was in the 6th round, this is something else that's rumbling again. Zadarius is still out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think because of the way the draft went that we're calling Zadarius again, and maybe because one of these undrafted players, I'm sure you saw that. We don't have to go through every undrafted free agent that we got, but one of them is a wide receiver out of Syracuse, Jackson Meeks, and that is Zadarius Smith's nephew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with why we signed him.
No, right. No. I don't think it's ulterior, but right.
There's a lot
That's noteworthy.
There's a lot of little connections in Detroit to keep him there, to keep Zadarius back. He's still on the board. It's just whether he's gonna financially make sense for the Lions. We got the guard. We don't have to go out and get experience with guard because we had talked about maybe getting another guard in free agency. Now we got the draft fell the way it fell. I could see Zadarius coming back, but it's going to be on the Lions' terms. It's not going to be on Zadarius' terms.
Right.
He's going to, we may budge a little bit, but I just don't see us spending a lot of money on Zadarius to get him back.
We can't give him $10 million a year. I mean,
no.
It's.
I don't even know what the money is, like $6 million a year, or 6, 7, something like that in just a 1-year deal. I could see us doing that. I know we could have got him for $6 million in the original contract, but then we'd had $6 million in dead money next year. So that was like $12 million tied up into him, which was going to be, more than what the Lions wanted to spend.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. That is definitely something that could be on the table, and I would not shock me if we have him on the roster, this month or by May.
Right.
But we'll see. Zadarius probably also isn't pining to do off-season workouts and stuff like that as a veteran. He's in no hurry.
He might wait until training camp starts.
He might. So
let them get through the first couple dog days of training camp before he hops in.
Yeah, then he'll come in. Was there any undrafted player that you found interesting?
There was nobody that I had circled that was it's funny because we always have an undrafted player that makes the roster, right? We have an undrafted free agent that typically makes the roster. It's much harder this year than years in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anybody on there that has any edge over anybody else. There's nobody, sometimes there's a decent name, that for whatever reason fell through and did not get drafted. Nobody really jumping out at me. How about you, though? I mean, is there anybody that you've got circled that you think's...
There's 2 players I want to mention. First is they got a guy from Grand Valley State. I always like when they
Right.
get the in-state guys. They got the safety Ian Kennelly out of Grand Valley State, so I looked at that. The other player I'm going to mention, and this is only because he responded to us on Twitter because we gave him a shout out, was Mason Miller for North Dakota State. We gave him a big congrats, and he was kind enough to, just message us back. So that was nice. So I'm going to give him a shout out there. But no one else really. And then you already mentioned Jackson Meeks, with the Zedarius connection.
The tight end from Ole Miss, Caden Prescorn. I don't know if that's how you say his name. That's an interesting because this dude's, I think he's like 25 or 26-year-old rookie. He's married. He's got 2 kids. He's a whole ass adult coming into the league like that. And
yeah,
the odds are always stacked against these guys, but that's somebody that you're looking at. And then, obviously we hope somebody from here shows what they're made of, and, makes a realistic shot for the roster, or very least, jumps on the practice squad, and maybe they're playing, we've seen it time and time again. Maybe they'll be getting some snaps.
Yeah. I think, just the positions alone tell you a little bit. So we got 2 offensive linemen, a wide receiver, a tight end, 2 running backs, an edge, a cornerback, and a safety. And, the running backs do not surprise me because we didn't draft a running back, and we just you need some more guys back there. But we'll see. Tight end didn't surprise me either. Grabbing another wide receiver after we drafted 2 was a little interesting. But whatever we can do to get Zedarius back, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing that we want to talk about here is on Reddit. So we have a Reddit group, our Talking Grit podcast Reddit group. I have a section for mailbag questions. We just had a guy that's messaged me before on Reddit. Always asks really good questions. He goes by the username of CAINT1154. And he had a very long, very good paragraph written. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically his question boils down to: has Brad Holmes' aggression crossed into recklessness in terms of the draft? So he's like given up substantial draft capital for 3 straight drafts for players that could have been available later in the draft. So do you think that he's turning Brad Holmes is reckless? First, we'll start there, Jacob.
I mean, using that terminology, is he reckless, is hilarious, because no, everything he does is very calculated. And that is the most common thing, is that, we're trading up for these guys who would be available later in the draft. You don't necessarily know that. We don't know the other team's draft boards. We don't know who they're looking at. The only one that I would say was probably accurate, or that I think is probably accurate, was Manu, because that was somebody that was like not even projected to be drafted by most measures. Very raw talent, and then we traded up to get him. So that one, I guess I can see, but at the same time, sometimes you have to roll the dice. And in the same regard, like, people don't like that we give up that draft capital because we've drafted Amon-Ra late. We've drafted Aleem McNeil, Kirby Joseph, Derek Barnes, all these, 3rd, 4th round players that we're getting that are huge contributors to the team. All of those guys are also guys that you're taking a chance on. We traded up for Derek Barnes, and nobody's really batting an eye about it because Derek Barnes came and, did what Brad Holmes thought he was going to do. I think the knock is that right now it looks like we traded 3 picks. We traded a 4th, I think it was a 4th and 2 5ths for Broderick Martin, and that really has not panned out. But once again, you have to take a shot at these. You like the player, you like what they're about, you like what you think they're going to become. That's why you're drafting them to the team. Not every single pick, every single time plays out, as every Lions fan should know without a doubt. We've almost just become spoiled by how well the team is drafted, that we think that every single 5th, 6th round, not every 5th round pick is going to be competing at an all-pro level. It just doesn't happen. So, right now this year, Tesla, we have, all the picks that we moved up to get him. It's going to take a few years before we find out if that was worth it or not. But we like him enough that we want to move up and we want him on the team, and that's what we had to do to get him. I'm completely fine we talked about this before. I anticipated trading up several times. That's just what Brad Holmes does. That's just what we do. We like these guys. We have the target on them. We move up and we grab them. And it works out for us more often than it doesn't. I mean, you look at every player that Brad Holmes has drafted, there's way more high profile, high contributing players than there are people that you would ever be able to say are busts. And because of that is probably why Broderick Martin's getting, a longer leash than most people would. Because, I mean, really, we've seen a lot out of Broderick Martin, and we kind of know what he is at this point. And yet here we are still, one final straw here for him probably, but technically you could say the jury's still out on that, right? We don't know for sure. Real quick, something interesting is that when we traded up for Manu last year, we gave up a 3rd round pick this year. And I don't know if you saw this, but so the pick we gave up was to the Jets. The Jets traded that to the Seahawks. That pick this year was used to draft Jalen Milroe. But it's less about him. That was just a fun fact. But the very next pick on the board was safety Jonas Sanker. And that was somebody we both really wanted.
Yep.
So you know what? Maybe if we didn't have Manu, we have that 3rd round pick, and then Sanker is a Lion.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I will say is we don't know what players that the Lions maybe in the past have chosen not to move up for that are on other people's teams, and maybe they're really good players. And Brad Holmes has said, you know what? I'm never letting that happen again. If I have my conviction on a guy, I'm going to trade up and get him. We don't have all the information, right? So Brad Holmes does, and the Lions do. So they know what they've done in the past. I get that where people are like, well, with Tesla in particular this year, he might have been available at our normal pick. And then we gave up 2 3rd round picks. And yes, we could, Derek Barnes, Aleem McNeil, those are 3rd round picks that the Lions have had that are major contributors on this team. So we're giving up those picks in the future. But this is who Brad Holmes is. I would rather have Brad Holmes get the guys he wants on this team and the guys that Dan Campbell believes in than guys that they believe in less. I believe you get the best bang for the buck there. At some point, yeah, it's impossible for us to know what we gave up because we don't know who the Lions, we're going to pick in the 3rd round next year. We just never going to be able to play the game. I know you looked at and said, oh, we drafted Jalen Milroe and then Sanker. We can look ahead and who we potentially would have picked, but we don't know. So we don't know what we're going to give up. And we also don't know what those players would have turned into as Lions because they would have the Lions coaching staff, which I believe is one of the best in the league. So it's hard to compare. That's all apples and oranges. I'm perfectly fine with Brad Holmes getting the guys that he wants. My fear is that other teams will know that Brad Holmes will do that and take advantage of the fact that, Brad Holmes really wants to move up and we're going to be able to, he's not going to be able to fleece us on any deals. We're going to, he's going to have to give us everything because he'll do it because he has really good convictions on a guy. I'll deal with that. If he keeps drafting starters for this team and players that, are going to earn a second contract, let's do it. And we have a lot less roster spots now. So it's like, we're going to trade back. We're going to trade back and draft a guy later on for what? For extra picks that we're not going to be able to use. I mean, he's going to end up trading those picks and moving up for other guys. Like if we'd have moved back in the 1st round, picked up an extra 3rd round, he would have traded that and it would have been gone for Tesla. So whatever. I don't think it's reckless at all. I like him being aggressive and I like him following his draft board.
Agreed. 100%.
Yep. So, but I also don't think that he's above criticism. So I don't want to hear and say anyone that thinks that, that has that thought that he's being too aggressive. I mean, you could have those thoughts and we could debate it. And I don't saying that I'm right. But that's just my belief. There's no way to know this. This is just a feel. Because it's just hard to know what would happen in the future, what we would do with those picks. However, if he keeps drafting all pros and Pro Bowl safeties and guys that we want to give a second contract, that's a winning draft for me. All these people that have graded this draft, that's all stupid stuff. And that's what stuff I would look forward like 5-10 years ago, I loved that because the Lions always kept getting A grade because number one, we had a high draft pick. Number two, we were drafting people off ESPN's board. And how
Yeah.
often did those people work out? And that's why they got graded A grades because we were drafting guys based on that criteria. I'm going to go off Brad Holmes' draft board. We don't know what that is other than the players that he picks, but working out a lot better now than it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago before we had Brad Holmes.
I mean, you look at every Brad Holmes draft class, you're like, wow, that was great. Wow, that was great. Wow, that was great. And then you can look at the year before he came and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that was not so good. And then you keep going back like, oh, yeah, that wasn't good. That wasn't good. So,
how many of those guys were earning second contracts with the Lions? They weren't.
Right. Hardly ever.
And, last year's, maybe it was not, we haven't seen the full extent of last year's picks. We just haven't yet. However, 2023 Lions were widely panned for that draft, and that's could other than his first class, that's 2023 is an all-time class,
Right.
And 2021 is an amazing class, and there is going to be an argument about which one is the better draft class. But if you remember, no one liked that draft class. The media was on Brad Holmes about that draft. And how does it look now? It looks we're going to have the argument later on this summer, Jacob, about, how are we going to sign those guys and who deserves the second contract more out of all those, those four top picks. We're going to have those discussions. And
What
that's
a great
awesome.
problem to have.
That's awesome to have those discussions and have that problem, like you said. But thank you for the question. I don't know how to pronounce it. I assume it's like Kate.
I don't know if his name is Kane.
Yeah.
Is his name Kane T? I don't know.
But awesome question. I appreciate it. I hope that answered your question. Any follow-ups, just direct them there. Anybody else has questions, you could either do it in the comments section on Spotify. You could just go to, our Talking Grit podcast page on Reddit. There's a mailbag question section there. You can certainly do it there. So, or while we're live on YouTube, like Coda did earlier, you could throw up a question there. Be glad to answer it for you guys. So, all right, Jacob, Tigers are getting beat here. We're gonna lose this one.
It was going really well until we started the podcast. Then
It
started.
did. Now
I've got it on over here, and I can see out of my peripheral every time that light starts flashing. The Astros hit a home run or something.
Yeah, I got it. Damn it. I got it on my phone over here, my peripheral, and I could see. And we were up. Was it 3-0 at one point? Now we're down 8-3. So
I check every once in a while. Once you start talking, it's like, okay, it's time for me to look and see what's going on with the game.
Cool.
Now I don't need to listen to this.
All right, that's good. Maybe that's what our listeners do too. No. All right, man. Hey, didn't get to work with you today. I won't work with you tomorrow, but Wednesday, Thursday. You working Wednesday and Thursday?
I'm gonna call off those days.
All right. Well, that's all right. I'll be there. But I appreciate it makes the podcast a little sweeter for me when I don't work with you during the day a little bit, because then I get to really talk to you, because we didn't have any of these conversations at work, right?
Right.
Sometimes
it's very hard when we work to just keep it quiet.
I know. We don't want to waste the stuff, or sometimes I have thought some of the thoughts I had in the podcast just come up when I'm working. And
yeah, right.
And I'm like, oh man, and at that point I'm like, some of it I gotta write down, because I've had many times where a good thoughts come in my head and then I forget about it, and then we'll do the podcast and then I'll remember afterwards. I'm like, I meant to say that. But yeah, I really appreciate you getting this done today. I know you are so busy, you're telling me, with your kids baseball practice, that it's amazing you can, carve enough time to be able to
doesn't feel like the off season right now.
No. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to be talking schedule, right? I mean, that's coming up. So, and that's always fun. And for me, I told Sarah, I was like, well, in 2 weeks we get to see what our fall looks like, because, we got to plan all these
things all
around it. So, which I will gladly do, because watching Lions football is so awesome. And
You know, it's funny. We both had that moment. So it was when the draft started, and the Lions played like that video before the draft, and it was like the season highlights and everything. And, you know, we both just sat there glued to the screens, like, God, I missed that.
I know. It is. Man, I get sometimes like I watch some of that stuff. Like I'll watch those hype videos and I will get a little teary just because I just remember emotionally where I was when those plays happened or something like that and how cool it is. And just the fact when you're in a stadium, like even at that draft party, I know that we didn't have a great time, but we're there with all these like-minded Lions fans. These are super fans. These are guys coming out to see who the Lions pick. And
Right.
so we're all in the same boat that we are so emotionally tied with those people. So like you feel this kinship because you're just there with them and you just look at like how
Kinship.
yeah. So is that a word that you don't approve of?
You almost made it the whole podcast without some old ass comment. The
But
kinship. All right.
I like it.
I know what you mean. The energy,
All right.
the vibe, like the collective,
Yes.
like, hey, we're all in this together. 100%.
And also it's where we all came from. We have like suffered through a lot with this franchise. And you know, I'll tell you something that Preston told me it's like this weekend or something. We're watching Tigers, right? And Spencer Torkelson hits a home run. And he looked at me and said, you know, Dad, he's my favorite Tiger. And he goes, I am so proud that I'm like, he was my favorite player last year and he had a rough year and he's still my favorite player. And he goes, I'm proud that I didn't, you know, wasn't a bandwagon guy, you know, and just like gave up on him. And, you know, he's 13 and for him to have a thought like that was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. But it also feels like for all of us Detroit fans that are stuck through the Lions for as long as we did and put up with the bad teams that we did, the bad draft picks, bad coaches, you know, all this stuff. It feels like we're on the other side, and I will never stop appreciating what we have right now. So it's
Just got to soak it up.
yeah. Tigers aren't out of it yet. Riley Green just hit a 2-run homer. So and Torque's up. No, we're not out of it yet.
Don't count us out.
Yeah.
If Torque hits a bomb right here as you're talking to him, give him props.
Riley Green has hit 2 home runs today. He is breaking out of his slump. If we get Torque and Riley going at the same time, this is unbelievable.
I know. That's the one thing we've been missing. And somehow we're still first in the American League.
Yeah, it's awesome. Best run differential, too. Great things. So, all right, man. Anything else before we head out of here?
No, man, I'm good.
Man.
Another week closer to the season. Another week closer to training camp.
I know. Get some real football and start seeing this team. It was neat just seeing everybody show up, like all the Lions players, and what a perfect time with the Pistons going on, and like a lot of those guys showed up. Dan Campbell showed up at the game on Sunday. God, Detroit loves Dan Campbell.
Yes.
So, all right. For Jacob, I'm Jason. Until next week, go Lions.